Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Car Question. We are still here with Mazda, but this time to talk about the Mazda 3. Mr. Dave Coleman, welcome back once again, my all-wheel drive expert.
Good to see you again. It's been minutes since we talked before.
Did you watch the other Car Question video about diagonal testing?
Oh, I've seen a couple of those, yeah.
Dave, the Mazda 3 will be an impressive new car. Mazda has played all its cards, and they're putting an all-wheel drive system in that car. And our fans that are watching Car Question ask us to talk about that solid axle configuration, but also the all-wheel drive. What can you tell us about this new car?
Well, first of all, there's some confusion about the difference between a solid axle and a torsion beam axle. So a solid axle will typically have a solid beam connecting the two wheels. A torsion beam is basically two trailing arms. Each wheel is on a trailing arm, and a beam that connects the two that is up near the pivot point, not by the wheels. So when the wheels go up and down, the connecting beam moves up and down about a quarter of the amount that the wheels do.
But it's enough to show a difference on the road.
Yeah, well, what that beam is doing, besides making the whole system simpler so that the two sides can share load in a corner, it's letting them move independently, and it's twisting like a sway bar does.
You got to be truthful about that. When a lot of people saw that, they thought, wow, a Mazda 3 with that kind of configuration, everybody's going independent suspension. Why go for this kind of system?
Yeah, it's confusing. Honestly, I was worried about it when we first decided we were going to do it, so I can totally understand why people are freaked out. The thing about torsion beams is we assume that they're bad suspensions because they're usually on bad cars, right? Torsion beams have a couple things going for them, some of which are high priorities on bad cars. They are cheap and simple, and they are very compact, so they're good for trunk space. So on a car where low cost is important and trunk space is important, you always see that. Most of those cars are terrible to drive. In tuning and developing this car, we were kind of surprised to find that a simple suspension like that had much bigger benefits than we expected. We're trying to tune the car to have a certain kind of motion that the more we studied the people in the car and how they reacted to the way the car moved, the more we understood that as a car hits a bump, it needs to have a very clean, simple input to the passengers. And the more complicated suspensions with a bunch of different bushings and a bunch of different things moving in different directions, the bump will kind of be broken up into pieces as you hit a bump and the bushings deflect and it moves back a little bit and then the wheel goes up and moves forward again. And the passengers feel that, not consciously, but subconsciously. The part of you that's trying to balance in the car, and honestly the part that's trying to balance your head on top of your neck, is reacting to all these different inputs and having a harder time balancing. If we can make the input really clean, so there's one diagonal input that comes up, you're more comfortable. And it turns out we can actually then tune the suspension a little bit firmer and you're still comfortable. So much to our surprise, we found that if we took a multi-link that has 7 different bushings in it, toss that out, 7 bushings per each wheel, so 14 for the whole rear, right? And put in a torsion beam that has 1 bushing for each wheel, we can tune how the handoff between the tire deflection and the bushing deflection and the suspension deflection, how that handoff works so that it makes one smooth input. And all of the advantages of a multi-link suspension are for real, and the challenges of a torsion beam are real. It's a little harder to tune because everything you change changes 3 other things because of the way every part of it does multiple tasks. But the simplicity of tuning it paid off more than what we lost on the multi-link, that it actually ended up a simpler suspension worked better.
There you go, guys. Answered. So now,
more complicated than you thought, right?
yeah, more complicated. So we're gonna have to test that out and make sure it really feels the Mazda dynamics. Because I was looking at that and I said to myself, what about that zoom, vroom, vroom attitude? How am I gonna get it with that kind of suspension? But we're gonna have to see that. But the next question is all about all-wheel drives. So will it be the same system that we find in the CX-5 with those new algorithm and the intervention also of G-vectoring control?
So it's based on the same system that's in the CX-5. Everything about the CX-5 still applies to the new Mazda 3, all of our next generation all-wheel drive systems. In addition to that, it's more efficient than it was before. The old system would only go to 98% front when it's cruising on dry pavement because there's a little bit of backlash noise that happens when you unload the rear and the rear gears can start to rattle. We put some dampers in there that get rid of that rattle. The other thing that can happen is when you completely unload it, there's a little bit of delay when you start to engage it. We changed the algorithms to overcome that delay and to actually more quickly engage and more accurately hit the exact torque target that we're looking for. More excitingly, I think, the algorithm that controls how much torque split is more sophisticated and is looking at the way the car is shifting load dynamically from the front to rear tires and side to side and applying torque based on your more dynamic driving. So we can actually kind of throw more rear torque in a situation where you're accelerating out of a corner and make the car rotate better. and it's connected to the steering now. There's through the same logic that's driving GVC. As you turn in, you want that system to decouple, because if the front and rear wheels are tied together, the car won't want to turn.
You want to get your car balanced when you enter the curve.
Right. So it goes to two-wheel drive as you turn in, and then as you straighten out, it'll use the all-wheel drive system coupling back up to help pull the car back straight. And so we're just integrating all the different control systems in the car to make it behave more consistently and more predictably. I've driven a car at our proving ground in Hokkaido in Japan on ice. And we had an actual switch where we could switch between the current logic of our current system, and then you turn on the rear wipers and it would switch to the seventh generation logic. And the difference was really dramatic. You would turn in better, or track through a corner better, and then it would power out, rotating really naturally and just point you right where you wanted to go. It was really a big improvement. So one difference between the Mazda 3 all-wheel drive and what we've seen on our SUVs before is that we have sort of different expectations for what people are doing in a car versus what they're doing in an SUV. All of our SUVs have a traction control off button in case you get stuck, but you can't actually turn the stability control fully off. In a car, we expect if you want to go have fun, you can turn the stability control off completely. So that button location for the off-road mode isn't there. And we also don't have the ground clearance in that car to go off-road. We're not really expecting anybody to do that. So in a situation where you pick a tire up off the ground, it's just going to spin. We don't have that special algorithm to break that tire because it's not an off-road car.
But you're going to be able to close completely the stability system, and now it's going to be honing time?
It may well be hooning time.
We're going to be able to have fun because a lot of good all-wheel drive car give us some fun in the snow, in the condition that we encounter in our Quebec City region. Guys, you know what I'm talking about when sometimes you see my video. So the Mazda 3 will also be able to cope with all those kind of temperature and still be a car which is enjoyable to drive.
Right, exactly. It should be very fun to drive.
So when is the next Mazda Speed version coming out of that Mazda 3?
As soon as I can convince them there's a business case for it.
So there you go, guys. I hope it answers some of your question about the new Mazda 3 all-wheel drive. If you have any comments, feel free to write them in the comment section down there below. We will ask Mazda if you want us to do so. And thumbs up and also subscribe. Mr. Dave Coleman, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good to talk to you.